She told everyone I was holding her back and left me publicly without looking back. I stayed quiet and rebuilt everything alone. Months later, she applied for a job at my company without realizing I was the one reviewing applications. "You've always been the ceiling I keep hitting." She said that in front of 11 people. Not whispered, not in private, not even with the decency of looking ashamed while she said it. Loud, deliberate, and aimed. The kind of words that don't just hurt when they land. They keep replaying in your head at 2 a.m., years later, still echoing. I didn't respond. I didn't move. I just sat there holding a glass of red wine I hadn't touched in 20 minutes, staring at the woman I'd built 4 years of my life around, watching her smile at the people around her like she'd just said something brave, like she'd just freed herself. And in a way, she had. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that she hadn't freed herself from me. She'd freed me from her. And I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. I want you to understand something before I go any further. I am not a dramatic person. I don't do confrontations. I don't post subtweets. I don't call people out. I've never been the type to retaliate, to argue, to make a scene. My default mode has always been quiet. And for a long time, Qley used that against me. She mistook my patience for weakness. She confused my silence for submission. She looked at everything I'd done, everything I was still doing, and decided I was the problem. That I was the anchor, not the foundation. And when she finally said it out loud, in front of every single person in that room, I had a choice. I could fight back, or I could let her believe it. Let her walk away thinking she won. And then, quietly, alone, become someone she'd never be able to claim she knew. I chose the second one. What happened after that? I didn't plan any of it. But it unfolded so perfectly that sometimes I still sit back and wonder if the universe has a sense of humor. Spoiler, it does. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. I'm 29. At the time this story starts, I was 26, fresh into a mid-level operations coordinator role at a logistics firm, making decent money, but nothing spectacular. Qley and I had been together for 4 years, 3 months, and roughly 12 days. Not that I was counting, I just have a good memory for timelines. We met at a mutual friend's housewarming, the kind of party where nobody really knows the host all that well, but everyone shows up anyway, because there's free food. She was clever, loud in a charming way, the kind of woman who commanded every room she walked into without even trying. I fell for that instantly. I always do. The first year was everything people write songs about. We were inseparable. She'd show up at my apartment at midnight with takeout and bad ideas. I'd drive 2 hours to surprise her when she was having a rough week. We finished each other's sentences. We laughed constantly. I introduced her to my family. She told her friends she'd finally found someone real. That word kept coming up when she described me early on. Real. Like everything before me had been decorative. And I believed it. I held on to that word like a title. Like being real to her meant something permanent. It didn't. Or maybe she just changed what she considered real somewhere along the way. And I was too close to notice the shift happening until it was already done. The job she had when we met was fine. Marketing assistant at a small agency. She was good at it. Genuinely creative. Always coming up with campaign angles that were sharper than her salary deserved. But she had bigger ambitions. She'd talk about them constantly. She wanted to lead creative teams. She wanted to run campaigns for global brands. She wanted a name people recognized in certain rooms. I supported all of it. Loudly, consistently, and without condition. When she applied for a senior associate role at a bigger agency, I proofread her portfolio 3 times. When she got rejected, I sat with her for 2 hours while she vented, then spent the rest of the evening helping her reframe the whole deck. When she got into a night course to sharpen her strategy skills, I covered dinner on her late nights, picked her up from campus, and celebrated every grade like it was a personal win. I want to be precise about this. Not because I want credit, but because what comes next only makes sense if you understand the context. Things started changing around year 3. It was subtle at first, the kind of subtle that's only visible in hindsight. She started spending more time with a new group of colleagues. Nothing wrong with that. She started staying later at work, networking harder, putting serious energy into her career. I was proud of her, genuinely. But somewhere in between the networking and the late nights and the new version of herself she was building, she started looking at me differently. Not badly, exactly. More like evaluatingly. Like she was measuring me against something. And I kept not quite reaching the line. I noticed it, but didn't say anything. That was probably my first mistake. Or maybe my last. I'm still not sure. There was a dinner party in February, hosted by her colleague, a woman named Tessa, who had the kind of apartment in the city that makes you quietly question all your life choices the moment you walk in. Exposed brick, floor-to-ceiling windows, a kitchen that had clearly never seen a frozen meal. There were maybe 11 people there, including us. Kayla's work crowd, mostly ambitious, polished, the type who drop company names into casual conversation the way other people mention the weather. I was the odd one out, which was fine. I knew it going in. I was there as her partner, not as a professional peer. I made small talk, laughed at the right moments, listened more than I spoke. And for the first hour, everything was fine. Then someone asked what I did. I told them. Operations coordinator. Logistics sector. The briefest pause. Not rude, exactly. Just the kind of pause that carries a verdict without saying one. Kayla jumped in before the silence stretched too far. He's good at what he does, she said. And I'm not entirely sure why that felt like an apology. But it did. I looked at her. She didn't look back. The second hour of the evening is where it happened. Someone brought up ambition. Specifically, what it takes to really go after what you want. The conversation got animated fast. These were people who love talking about this stuff. Goals. Drive. The willingness to sacrifice comfort for growth. Everyone was nodding, contributing, stacking ideas. And then Kayla said something that stopped me cold. Honestly, the hardest part isn't the work, she said, voice carrying across the room. It's the environment you come home to. A couple of people nodded. Like, if the energy around you isn't matching where you're trying to go, it slows you down. More nodding. And then she looked at me. Not like she was including me. Like she was referencing me. You've always been the ceiling I keep hitting. That was the sentence. Delivered to the room. Wrapped up neatly like it was just an honest observation. Like she was talking about traffic or bad weather. Not about the person sitting 3 feet away from her. Not about 4 years. Not about everything. The room went briefly, terribly quiet. Then someone changed the subject. And Kayla turned back to her wine like nothing had happened. I did not say a word. Not at the dinner. Not in the Uber home. Not when we walked into the apartment. She filled the silence with casual conversation. How good Tessa's risotto was. How funny Owen got when he'd had 3 drinks. And I let her. I just kept thinking about the way the room had looked at me after she said it. Polite. Careful. Avoiding eye contact. The particular way people look at you when they've just witnessed something they don't want to acknowledge witnessing. I went to bed before her and stared at the ceiling for 3 hours, running it back, wondering if I was overreacting, wondering if she'd meant it the way it sounded. But here's the thing about words like that. The ones that land perfectly, the ones that seem to fit the shape of every quiet resentment someone's been carrying for months. They don't come from nowhere. You don't say something that precise, that clean, that calibrated, accidentally. She'd been thinking it for a while. She just finally found the right room to say it in. We didn't talk about it the next morning. She made coffee. I made eggs. We moved around each other like 2 planets in adjacent orbits, close enough to feel the gravity, far enough not to collide. I gave her the chance to bring it up. She didn't. I gave her a second chance. She didn't. By noon I realized she wasn't going to. Not because she'd forgotten, but because in her mind, she'd already moved on from it. Or maybe it hadn't registered as a moment to apologize for. Maybe it had just registered as a truth she'd finally said out loud. And that was worse. I want to be honest with you about something. I had been thinking about our relationship for a while before that night. I was 30% happy and 70% comfortable. And I knew the difference. I just kept choosing the comfortable explanation. I told myself it was just a rough patch. I told myself every long relationship has friction. I told myself that her restlessness was about her career, not about me. But sometimes you just don't say it. Not even to yourself. Because saying it makes it real. And real means you have to do something about it. And I wasn't ready. After that dinner, I was ready. The conversation happened on a Wednesday night. She'd been distant all week. Not cold exactly. Just somewhere else while physically present. I brought it up directly. We should talk about the dinner. She didn't look surprised. I figured you'd bring that up. You said I was a ceiling. I said that environment matters. You said I was the ceiling you keep hitting. A long pause. I think I've been frustrated for a while, she said. With me. She didn't answer right away, which was its own answer. I feel like I've changed a lot in the last year, she said finally. And I feel like we're not in the same place anymore. I nodded. I was trying to stay calm. What does that mean for us? I think I need to keep moving. And I don't know if staying is going to let me do that. There it was. Not a fight. Not a dramatic explosion. Just a very clean, very quiet implosion. For years packed up into 11 words. I don't know if staying is going to let me do that. I looked at her for a long moment, and I made a decision. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to list everything I'd done, every way I'd supported her, every moment I'd shown up. Not because I didn't want to, because she'd already made up her mind. And I respected myself too much to audition for a role she'd already cast someone else in, even if that someone else was just the next version of her life. Okay, I said. That was it. Okay. She left on a Saturday, took her things in 3 trips. I helped with the heavier boxes. Neither of us cried. That bothered me more than anything else. When someone takes 4 years of shared space and loads it into a Toyota Camry without a single tear, it makes you wonder how long they'd already been gone before they actually left. She said she hoped I'd be okay. I said I would be. She hugged me at the door. And that was it. She drove away. I stood in the doorway for a minute, staring at the empty parking spot. Then I walked back inside, sat on the couch, and the silence hit me like a wave. The first 2 weeks were bad. I won't dress that up. I went through the motions at work, ate badly, slept worse, stared at my phone not because I wanted to text her, but because I didn't know what to do with my hands anymore. The apartment felt like a stage set with the production canceled. Everything still in place. Nobody there to play their part. My friend Cole came over one night and just sat with me. Didn't try to fix it. Didn't offer advice. Just watched the game with me and ate bad pizza and let the evening be exactly as mediocre as it needed to be. That helped more than any conversation would have. I want to pause here and tell you what I found out around this time. Because I'd been keeping my head down, processing privately, not talking much. And so I wasn't in the social loop. I didn't know what was being said. It was Cole who told me. He pulled up a voice note on his phone and played it for me. It was Qley, talking to Tessa at some gathering. Someone had apparently recorded it without her knowing and sent it to Cole, who'd known her from our shared circle. I'm not going to quote it word for word, but the summary is this. She was telling Tessa that I had been dragging her down for years, that I was comfortable in mediocrity, that she'd been carrying the emotional weight of the relationship while I stayed stuck, that she was finally free to become who she was supposed to be. And then, the part that really got me. She laughed. Light, easy, unbothered. Like it was a relief to finally say it to someone who'd understand. Cole turned the phone off and looked at me. I didn't know if I should tell you. I'm glad you did. She's been saying this stuff to a lot of people. I sat with that for a minute. She wasn't just done with me. She was rewriting the story. She was making sure that in every version of the narrative that spread through our shared social circle, she was the one who got out. And I was the one she got out from. I remember being incredibly, almost inexplicably calm about this. Not numb. Calm. The kind of calm that comes when you finally have perfect clarity. Because here's what she didn't understand. Every word she said about me, every story she told at dinner parties, every voice note she sent to Tessa, every casual conversation where she cast me as the ceiling, it was all based on a version of me that had existed in the context of her. A version shaped around her schedule, her ambitions, her moods, her needs. She had never once seen what I could do when nobody else was the priority. She didn't know, and I was going to find out. I need to tell you something about my actual situation at work, because it's important later. My role as operations coordinator was solid, but not spectacular. Mid-level, steady, functional. But I'd been watching a part of my company quietly for about 2 years. A division that was struggling. Not because the work was bad, because the internal systems were a disaster. No one was communicating. Processes were tangled. The team was capable, but operating in chaos. And I'd been drawing up ideas, off the clock, just for my own clarity, about how I'd fix it if someone gave me the chance. Nobody ever asked, because I was quiet about it. And quiet people don't usually get asked. After Qley left, I stopped being quiet. I put together a full operational restructuring proposal. 63 pages. Not aggressive, just thorough, backed by data I'd been tracking for months. And I walked it into my director's office one morning and put it on his desk. He looked at me over his glasses. You wrote all of this? Yes. Yourself? Yes. He read through the executive summary right there while I stood across from him. Then he looked up. Sit down. I sat. That conversation lasted 2 hours, and it changed the entire trajectory of what came next. Within 6 months, I was leading a restructuring pilot program for that division. They created a role specifically around the work I was proposing. Senior Operations Project Lead. 2 levels above where I'd been. It wasn't handed to me. I earned every inch of it. I was in the office early. I was on calls late. I learned things I didn't know I needed to learn. I made mistakes and fixed them before they became problems. And slowly, the division started working. The chaos smoothed out. The team got better. Results started climbing. My director started copying me on emails he wouldn't have before. And something quietly, steadily began shifting in my professional life. I kept my head down. I didn't post about it. I didn't broadcast it. I just worked. Qley noticed. "You're different," he said one evening. "How?" "You're focused." Like actually focused. Not distracted. He wasn't wrong. For the first time in years, every single bit of my energy was going towards something that belonged entirely to me. No compromise. No calibration. No managing someone else's mood while also trying to manage my own ambitions. Just work. Just progress. Just me. I won't pretend it wasn't lonely sometimes. It was. But there's a particular kind of loneliness that's also clean, where the silence isn't a wound, it's just space. Space you can fill with whatever you want. And I was filling mine with something real. By month 8, the pilot program had exceeded every metric they'd set for it. My director brought me into a senior leadership meeting. I presented the results. I answered questions directly, without hedging. And after the meeting, the VP of operations, a woman named Harriet, who had spent 30 years in logistics and did not impress easily, pulled me aside. "You're the one who wrote the original proposal?" "Yes." "How long have you been with the company?" "About 3 years." She studied me for a moment. "How do you feel about scaling this?" I told her I'd been waiting for someone to ask. She smiled. It wasn't a big smile, but from Harriet, it was enormous. 3 weeks later, they announced the formation of a new department, Operational Systems Redesign, and they offered me the position of head. Not interim, not provisional, head, with full hiring authority. I sat in my car after signing the papers and just breathed for a while. I thought about that dinner party. I thought about being called a ceiling. I thought about her voice in that recording, comfortable in mediocrity, and I just breathed. Now I need to tell you about the part of this story I genuinely didn't see coming. Because even with everything I just told you, even with all the quiet progress, the career shift, the new department, I still wasn't prepared for what happened next. The new department meant we were growing, and growing meant hiring. I had a small team helping me build out the hiring pipeline, but I reviewed every application personally. Every single one. This was important to me. I'd built this thing from a proposal on a desk. I wasn't going to hand off the decision of who came in. We posted 3 positions. Senior Process Analyst, Operations Strategy Associate, 1 Lead Coordinator role. The applications came in steadily. We were about 6 weeks in. I was working through a batch one morning. Coffee going cold on the desk, headphones on, just moving through cover letters and CVs, when I opened one that stopped me completely. Not because of the content, because of the name. Kayla Brennan. I stared at the screen for a moment. Then I stared at it longer. Then I leaned back in my chair and looked at the ceiling. Not metaphorically, the actual ceiling. Because I needed a second. I want to be precise about what I felt. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't vindictive excitement. It wasn't even all that satisfying, if I'm honest, not in the way you might expect it to be. It was something quieter than that. Something close to a very long, slow exhale. Like the universe had just tapped me on the shoulder and said, "You see?" I read the application carefully. The whole thing. Her CV was good. She'd moved agencies twice in the past year, each time stepping up. She was at a senior associate level now. Her portfolio highlighted 3 campaign strategy projects. All solid. Her cover letter was confident, specific, and well-written. She mentioned the company by name. Mentioned the new department specifically. Mentioned that she was drawn to companies that were restructuring and growing, because she believed in building things from the ground up. I read that last line twice. Building things from the ground up. She had no idea. No idea that the department she was applying to had been built from a 63-page proposal on a director's desk. No idea who ran it. No idea who was reading her words. I closed the application, set it aside, and I sat with the situation for the rest of the morning. Here is what I did not do. I did not reject her out of spite. I did not call her. I did not tell anyone on my team who she was. I did not draft a clever response designed to make the moment land dramatically. I am going to be completely honest with you about why. Because the second I let personal history enter the hiring process, I become the kind of person who uses professional power as a personal weapon. And I was not going to become that person. Not for this. Not for her. Not for anyone. What I did instead was something that required a different kind of discipline. I evaluated the application the same way I evaluated every other application. Skills, experience, relevance, fit. And here's where it got complicated. because she was actually qualified, not for the lead coordinator role that needed someone with more structural systems experience, but for the strategy associate position. She was competitive. Top 12% of the applicant pool, maybe top 10. I looked at her application for a long time that evening. Qley was the only person I told. We were at his place. I told him what happened. He put his beard down slowly. You're kidding. I am not. She applied to your company. She applied to my department. He stared at me. Does she know? She has no way to know. I'm not on public-facing materials. The department is new. What are you going to do? I looked at him. I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do. He studied my face. And if she makes it to the interview stage? Then she makes it to the interview stage. He picked his beard back up. You're a strange person. I know. She made it to the interview stage. I want to be clear, she earned that. The screening process was thorough. My team did the initial review. They didn't know her. They shortlisted her on merit. When the shortlist came to me, I approved it without changing anything, because changing it would have been wrong. The interview was scheduled for a Thursday at 10 a.m. I thought about it the night before. Not obsessively. Just the way you sit with a strange fact before it becomes a strange reality. She was going to walk into a room. She was going to sit across from someone. And that someone was going to be me. I wondered if she'd rehearsed her answers. I wondered if she'd looked up the department head. I wondered if she'd Googled. And I concluded, probably not. Because if she had, she would have found my name. And she would have called it off. Thursday morning, I was at my desk by 8:30. Reviewed my notes on every candidate we were seeing that week. Stayed professional. Stayed focused. At 9:55, my assistant knocked on the open door. Your 10 o'clock is here. Send them in. I kept my eyes on the notes for a second longer. Then I looked up, and she walked in. She was halfway through the door when she saw my face. And I watched the moment hit her. It didn't happen all at once. It happened in stages. One step. Recognition. A half step more. Confirmation. Then she stopped. Complete stillness. The kind that happens when your brain is processing something it genuinely wasn't prepared for. Her portfolio folder was in her right hand. Her left hand was slightly raised from the half gesture of entering the room. She just stood there, and I looked at her calmly. Good morning, I said. Please sit down. I want to describe that pause, because it lasted maybe 4 seconds, but it contained everything. For years. A dinner party. A Wednesday night conversation on a couch. A parking spot. A voice note. A 63-page proposal. 8 months of silence. A department built from scratch. And her, standing in the doorway of it. She sat down. She was good at composure. I'll give her that. By the time she was seated, she'd pulled herself together considerably. I didn't know, she said quietly. I know, I said. I would have. You would have withdrawn your application. She stopped. Probably yes. That wouldn't have been fair to you, I said. You qualified for this interview. You should get the interview. She stared at me. I opened my notepad. Should we begin? The interview lasted 55 minutes. I asked her the same questions I asked every other candidate. I followed the same structure. I did not bring up our past. I did not make it personal. I did not make it easy, either. But I made it fair. She answered well. She was sharp, prepared, thoughtful. Her examples were specific and well-framed. Twice she gave answers that genuinely impressed me, and I noted them the same way I'd note them for anyone else. Toward the end, there was a long question about navigating environments that are changing quickly. How do you operate in a team that's still defining its own processes? She thought about it for a moment. Then she said, honestly, you look for the people who built the thing, because they know where the bones are. And if they're willing to teach you, you can do a lot in a short time. She paused. Then she looked at me with something I hadn't seen from her in a long time. Not embarrassment. Not guilt. Something more honest than either of those. I think I used to underestimate that kind of person, she said. The builders. The ones who work quietly. I held her gaze for a moment. Then I wrote something in my notes. Is there anything you want to add before we wrap up? She was quiet for a second. I think I owe you an apology. Not here, I said. Not in this room. I know. I understand, I said. Thank you for coming in. She left. I sat at my desk for a while afterward. Didn't move. Just let the quiet settle. I need to rewind now, because there's a part of this story I haven't told you yet. And it's the part that makes everything else make sense. When Qley and I were together, I was already drawing those operational notes. I'd been mapping the problems in that division for over a year. I'd mentioned it to her once, casually, over dinner, that I was thinking of putting together some ideas. She'd half listened, asked a question or two, then said, that sounds like a lot of work for something that might not go anywhere. And I dropped it. Not because she told me to. Because her reaction made me feel like maybe she was right. Maybe it was a lot of effort for nothing. Maybe I was overthinking. That's the thing about being in the wrong relationship for a long time. It doesn't just take your energy. It takes your confidence in your own instincts. You start second-guessing the ideas that actually belong to you. You trim yourself down to fit the frame someone else built. And you call it compromise. It isn't. It's erosion. She wasn't wrong that I was different in our relationship. She was wrong about why. I wasn't mediocre. I wasn't a ceiling. I was compressed. And the moment she left, the pressure lifted. And everything I'd been holding and expanded. That's the part she never knew. That's the part none of them knew. The ceiling wasn't me. I was the room. The hiring decision came down to 3 finalists for the strategy associate role. Qley was one of them. All 3 were qualified. My team scored them independently. Then we compared. Then we deliberated. The final call was mine. I won't tell you I didn't think about it harder than I would have for anyone else. I did. Because I'm human. But the decision I made was the right one. And the reason I'm telling you this is because the right decision was not to hire her. Not because of our history. Because one of the other finalists, a quiet, intense woman named Bree who'd spent 3 years building systems inside a company half the size of ours, was just slightly better for what we needed. Her experience was more specific. Her instincts matched the role more precisely. It was a close call, but it was Bree. I had my team send out the decision letters. Standard process. Professional. Thanking each candidate for their time. Qley got the same letter everyone else got who didn't get the offer. 4 days later, she texted me. Not about the job. Can we talk? Not about the application. Just talk. I looked at the message for a long time. I thought about what I wanted. Not what was dramatic. Not what was satisfying. What I actually wanted. And the answer was some version of closure that didn't involve either of us performing for the other. Sure, I texted back. Coffee Saturday? We met at a small place near the waterfront. Not dramatic. Just quiet. She was already there when I arrived. Smaller, somehow, than she'd seemed in my memory. Not physically. Just, the larger-than-life version I'd been carrying around in my head had been constructed out of feeling. In person, she was just a person. Someone I'd once known very well. Someone I didn't know at all anymore. She wrapped both hands around her mug. I've been thinking about the dinner party since the morning after it happened, she said. That surprised me. And you never said anything. I didn't know how. You could have started with the words I'm sorry. She looked down. I know. Why didn't you? A long pause. Because I think I was scared that if I apologized, it would mean I was wrong about everything else. About needing to leave. About needing to change. And I wasn't wrong about that part. I know you weren't, I said. She looked up. You needed to go, I said. I think we both needed that. But the way I talked about you was unnecessary, I said. And unkind. Yes. She set her mug down. I heard about what you built. Not from you, from people. From the professional circles we both apparently orbit now. Your name comes up. She said it like it still surprised her. I didn't know you were capable of. She stopped herself. And I think she realized how that sentence was going to end before it left her mouth. I let her sit with that for a second. You didn't know because I wasn't, I said. Not while I was trying to fit inside someone else's frame of what I should be. She flinched slightly. Not much, but enough. I'm not saying that to hurt you, I said. I'm saying it because I think it's true. And I think somewhere in you, you knew it. You just drew the wrong conclusion from it. She looked at me. I thought you were comfortable being small. I was uncomfortable being invisible, I said. Different thing. We stayed for about an hour. The conversation stayed honest without becoming a fight. She apologized properly. Not just for the dinner. For the narrative she'd built around me afterward. For the things she'd said to Tessa. For making sure the story of us had a clear villain. I accepted it. Because holding on to it wasn't doing anything useful anymore. Before she left, she stood up and pulled on her coat. How did you decide? On the hire. It wasn't me. No, it wasn't. Was it close? Yes. She nodded slowly. Was there any part of you that wanted to just? No, I said. Because if I'd hired you out of guilt, it would have undermined everything I built. And if I'd rejected you out of spite, same thing. So you just evaluated the application. I evaluated the application. She looked at me for a moment. And then she laughed. A small, real laugh. Not the unbothered laugh from the voice note. Something more like recognition. You haven't changed, she said. I have, I said. But not in the ways you expected. She nodded. And then she left. I watched her walk out the door. No dramatic pause this time. No lingering. She was just someone walking away. And it was fine. That was about 3 months ago now. I've thought about this story a lot since then. Try to figure out what the point of it is, what the moral is supposed to be. And I keep coming back to the same thing. There isn't a moral, not a clean one. Life doesn't really do clean morals. What it does is give you moments. And what you do with those moments, how quietly or loudly you carry yourself through them, that's what builds the person you become. She called me a ceiling, in front of people who'd remember it. And I could have defended myself. I could have fought the narrative. I could have spent months making sure everyone knew my side. I didn't. I went home. I closed my door. And I worked. And somewhere in the silence of doing that, in the months of putting my head down and building something real, I stopped caring what the narrative said. Because the narrative wasn't my life. My life was. And my life was now something entirely different from what she described. The department keeps growing. We're hiring again next quarter. Harriet calls me directly now, which still catches me off guard sometimes. Cole made me buy a better couch for the apartment. I take walks in the evening sometimes. Think about nothing in particular. Feel the particular piece of someone who has nothing they're hiding from. I told you at the beginning that I chose silence. That I let her walk away thinking she won. I want to correct that slightly. I didn't let her think she won. I just stopped keeping score. There's a difference. Winning implies someone else was losing. And I wasn't competing. I never was. I was just doing the work. Quietly. Consistently. Alone. Until it became undeniable. Not to her. To me. That's the only place it ever needed to be. The last thing I'll say is this. The morning she walked into that interview room and saw my face. In those 4 seconds before she sat down, I saw something I hadn't expected. I saw someone who was genuinely shocked. Not by my success exactly, but by the possibility that they'd had the story wrong. That maybe the person they'd defined as the ceiling was actually the one who'd been standing quietly in the corner of the room, drawing up plans for what the building could look like. In that moment, that 4-second realization crossing her face wasn't satisfying the way revenge is satisfying. It was something else. Something more like the feeling you get when you've been carrying a weight for a very long time. And you finally set it down. And your hands are empty. And you realize they've been ready for something better the whole time. She called me a ceiling. I became the whole building. And I didn't need her to see it. I just needed to know it was real.